Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us for the Space & Co. Comm.Unity virtual events. Great to see you, and many of you joining us again. We've had fantastic feedback, so it's wonderful to be able to continue this series. It is brought to you by Space & Co. And just to share very briefly, our vision with these events is to provide you with some inspiration and tools that can help you both in your private life or your personal life and your professional life, because of course they're all blending together these days, aren't they? We have the joy of being in a studio environment, but of course I expect most of you are at home, so our lives are blending. Now, a couple of things to let you know. I'm joined today, of course, and again, by National Director at Space & Co, Shay Hooper. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Mark. Thank you.
And we also have joining us remotely down in Melbourne, we've got John Hanrahan, who's Head of Asset Management Office and Logistics at GPT Group. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Good to see you. And our guest today, our speaker, the man who's going to inspire you with some really innovative thinking about innovation, as it happens. His name is Dr Adrian Medhurst. He's an organisational psychologist. So thanks for joining us, Adrian. Look forward to hearing from you in a minute.
Great to be here.
Excellent. And you can tell us about Benny Button in a minute too, your organisation. So that's fantastic. Now, a couple of quick housekeeping tips as always. Make sure you do use the Q&A feature. We will be sending through some answers online as well as I get them on my iPad here. So really looking forward to this being a conversation, which of course is how this is designed to be as a live show. So make sure those Q&A questions come through. There will be a pop-up screen at the end of the event too. We're keen to continue to build and learn and grow and innovate. So please do that as well. And it's lunch hour. If you haven't had your lunch yet, make sure you got that all settled, and a pen and a paper, because you're going to learn, you're going to explore, and we're going to push you a little bit today. And so that's really fantastic. Now, on to our topic and the question of innovation, and is it forced or is it chosen? Shay. Now, I, as a journalist many moons ago, I was around a lot of CEOs and businesses, and the feeling was we could choose when we were going to innovate. What do you reckon today's like?
Well, I would love to say we can. I think there's still an element of choice, but I feel like there is a stronger push from the forced side of innovation at the moment. I think that change has happened really fast, and there has been an immediate need to think differently, adapt, and so I think the innovation has come from a forced dynamic. I'm really pleased that we have some great people join with us today to talk about innovation and to look at the forced versus chosen. And I'd like to introduce John Hanrahan, who I work alongside at GPT Group. John is the Head of Asset Management. He's been in the property industry for 13 years and has worked at the GPT Group since 2013. So welcome, John. John and I have worked alongside each other for a number of years and have found ourselves on the front line navigating this corona pandemic and looking at the disruption that has ensued across the property industry. And I'm really looking forward to hearing some insights from John today. I'm also really delighted to introduce Dr Adrian Medhurst, who joins us as our keynote speaker for our third virtual session. Adrian is an organisational psychologist and shares a similar passion to me, actually, which is looking at how we can get the best from our people and our organisations. Adrian's really taken that a step further though than me, and he's co-founder of Benny Button, which is an organisation that is helping their clients understand and leverage the relationship between performance and well-being. So today, Adrian is going to take us on an exploration of innovation. He's going to share some tools which can help us with creative thinking, and most importantly, an approach that not only helps us with the thinking, but turning those ideas into being implemented and impactful.
Yeah, great.
So welcome, Adrian. Thank you.
We could give it like a little virtual clap, I think, you know.
Thank you very much. Look, it is great to be here, and today's session is designed to be conversational. At the same time, I'm going to roll through a series of science-based creativity and innovation techniques and some key principles that we really need to consider and some processes we need to work through in order to make sure we have good ideas that we can move through to implementation to have impact. And so I'm going to dive right in, but in agreement with you and the way you started off, acknowledging the context that we're in. Times are challenging, and in our work and life, even before COVID-19, things were busy and fast-paced, and we needed to adapt and adjust to changes that were happening all of the time, and innovation is key to that. And right now, our work and life feels like it's been turned upside down by the disruption caused by COVID-19. And so as a result, it's true that we are forced to innovate. And in fact, there's a recent meme that I saw online that I thought was quite funny. Who is it that's responsible for your digital transformation? Is it A, the CEO, B, the CTO, or C, COVID-19? And I think that's quite funny. And many organizations are finding that innovation and transformation is required in response to the times we're in. In fact, one of our clients that has been trying to move to a digital delivery model with their business had been attempting this for years and not really getting it through their innovation committee. And then when times were such that they needed to, they were able to turn it on in 2 weeks. So we do see rapid innovation when it's forced, when we need to make progress. So let's start off with a really basic definition of innovation though, because innovation is a word that for many people they can feel is potentially intimidating or expensive or difficult, but we can really just land on this basic definition of innovation, which is that it's change that adds value. And so within that basic definition, we can understand that change that adds value might be something small, but that provides significant value. It could be a series of small things that build into great incremental value. And it can also be those bigger innovations that lead to a positive impact as well. So let's actually recognize that when we notice problems, when we notice disruption, when we notice challenges, when there are opportunities for us to innovate, what we're looking to do is to create change that adds value. So the first technique that I want to dive into today is mindfulness. And this might not be a typical one that people understand for how it links to creativity and innovation, but mindfulness is a capability, being skillful with our awareness, being able to focus our attention, avoid distraction, and engage in what matters most is really key to innovation. What's also true is that mindfulness helps us to be resilient. It helps us to engage with and work through assumptions and challenges and setbacks. And so I want to start off today's session with mindfulness as our technique because it really primes the mind to get into the right headspace and the right state, to notice good ideas, to think more creatively, and to then have the courage to persevere with good ideas when times get tough. So I'm not the only person that believes mindfulness is valuable in terms of creativity and innovation. The science is really strong in this space, and amazing innovators and entrepreneurs are doing this themselves as well. Richard Branson promotes that part of his routines is mindfulness and meditation practices, so much so that he endorses this within his airlines as well as his businesses. And if we just look at the series of benefits on your screen, there's so many that we could work through, but today I just want to call attention to problem solving, creativity, and innovation. Scientific research is showing us that mindfulness practices help us to actually solve problems more creatively, think more flexibly, and then move through to create change that adds value, which is innovation. So I'm actually going to give everyone on the line an opportunity to practice mindfulness. I'm going to give you a basic mind-body exercise that will help you to train your attention, to open your awareness to what's going on in your body, in your mind, in the present moment experience. And if you get distracted and your mind wanders, which it inevitably will, we'll practice the skill of bringing back our wandering attention to focus on the task at hand. So I'm just going to start off this animation for you. There's instructions at the bottom of the screen too. I'd really like everyone to join along with me. Wherever you are, if you're sitting, just uncross your legs, sit upright, and what you'll do is you'll have your palms faced up with the backs of your hands resting on your lap. And we're going to breathe, and as we breathe, we're going to tap the thumb of our right hand. As we breathe in, the thumb's going to tap the index, middle, ring, pinky, and open the palm at the top of the inhale. Exhale, left hand, the same thing. 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, left hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's the process. I'm going to guide you through the first cycle, and then I'll give you some space to just be present with the even flow of your breath in and your breath out. Okay, so if you feel comfortable to close down your eyes, that can help. Otherwise, with the palms faced up, we're all going to breathe out together, breathing out. And then when we breathe in with our right hand, we tap thumb to index, middle, ring, pinky, open the palm for space. Exhale, left hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, right hand. Tap. 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, left hand. Index, middle, ring, pinky, space. Continue in a rhythm that feels right for you, and I'll call this practice to a close in about a minute. Now everyone can feel free to suspend the tapping of their fingers and just follow the even flow of their own breath for a few moments more. And as you do that, just gather into your awareness. What qualities do you notice in your body? Where's your head at? What do you notice in terms of the nature of your thinking and how you're feeling? And as we bring this practice to a close, we just easily open the eyes, blinking them open. Now, I don't want to jar people's experience from this practice too much. So instead, what I'm going to do is to just acknowledge that for some of us, in doing that even breath practice, what we were doing was actually calibrating our nervous system, balancing the energizing in-breath with the calming exhale. And for some of us that have got, for instance, a fair bit of busyness, maybe even some stress going on in our lives at the moment, what we might have noticed as we practiced was that it was a little bit challenging, and that's okay. The principle here is practice makes progress. This capability of focusing our attention and broadening our awareness to what's going on and bringing back a distracted mind helps us in so many ways, but it's not a typical state of being. We do need to practice it. And much like when you were learning to ride a bicycle, at the start you might have been a bit wobbly and you needed to think about the handlebars and the pedals and so on, but the right sort of practice carried out over a sufficient period of time will lead to improvement. And the benefits in terms of innovation and creativity will come along the way if we can integrate practices like mindfulness. So just to give a bit of a pop science reference that illustrates this point, we can all remember Mr. Miyagi and Daniel-san in this famous scene where you're probably already doing it, wax on, wax off.
You know, this is an incredibly powerful reminder of, even though we're at home, but we actually still need to take the time to get our mind in the right space. And I think your Miyagi example is so powerful because we have to be ready, okay? And we have to kind of open ourselves up to a different way of thinking and breaking the routine. And can I just also add, I don't think I've ever been this relaxed on a live event ever.
And so what's incredible is that the byproducts of this practice give us access to these qualities like being calm, being clear-headed, and also for some of us breathing more easily, we can get the energy that we need to engage with focus on a task at hand. But the example here as well of cross-training, which is what Mr. Miyagi and Daniel-san achieved, in the controlled environment of the car wash, practicing wax on, wax off, it's the same as practicing mindfulness. We get benefits from it in the practice, but we also get benefits from it when we use it in the moments that matter. And for us, if we can train this skill in the moments that matter, where we need to think creatively and innovate, where we need to persevere with courage through problems in order to innovate successfully, then we've actually started building a capability that we can call on. So you're absolutely right. We can benefit from this state right here, right now, but we can also carry the benefits forward the more that we persevere with practice. So a little bit of a snapshot of the science behind why it works for those that want to take notes at home. It primes creative thinking. Mindfulness practice actually primes the mind to be open and receptive to new ideas, to think more creatively, to connect together different pieces of content and stimulus to form something new, which is the creative process. It improves our attention, so it's easier for us to actually notice and be perceptive when there are different ideas, opportunities, and inspiration around us. And it helps us to work through periods of stress and challenge. It gives us resilience and courage, which is essential when we're engaging with difficult circumstances like we have in COVID-19, where we need to engage with and work through setbacks and adversity and so on. So how do we use it? We need to practice this regularly in order to build the skill. It will help you, and to your point, it will prime the body and mind before problem solving and creative tasks. So do it before you're engaging in those tasks to warm up your mind and body for the activity. When you get stuck, step away from a challenge and practice this exercise, and then come back refreshed and restored. Make some time and give yourself some headspace for this routine. And of course, there are some amazing technologies and apps out there that can support you in this practice as well. So I'm going to hit the pause button there before we go on to technique number 2.
All right. Well, I'm going to go back to the definition that you had right at the top there about change that creates value. And in fact, that was a question from Julie that came through, and she said the simple, memorable definition is so good. Aside from Richard Branson, are there other people that come to mind that have really taken advantage of this idea?
In terms of mindfulness practice?
Yeah, and I think also good role models of innovation is what Julie's saying.
Well, there are really good role models everywhere, and in fact, a technique that I'm going to speak of soon can do just that. So you can see on the slide here, the next technique is called Roll With It, which is actually about adopting the role of someone who can inspire us to be innovative and creative. So that's where we're heading next. But I also encourage people to think very broadly about the different types of thinkers and role models that might even be in their backyard, that they can actually connect with and think through their lens, and even ask them about their perspective. So we don't just have to feel inspired by the likes of Richard Branson, because for some of us, his experiences aren't as relatable. I don't live on an island. I don't have those luxuries. And so we can actually find other types of role models that are relatable and perhaps even strategically connected in some way to the challenge that we're working on.
Yeah, great. Well, before we move on, Shay or John, I mean, this spontaneously, but how do you react to taking a pause? Because I don't think it's something we do in meetings very often. And we don't sort of come together in corporate environments and say, I'm now going to innovate, right? It tends to be those, you're going for a walk and you get an inspiration, an idea or something like that. So I just kind of wonder how challenging this concept is. Although mindfulness is not new, right?
Well, I'll jump in first and then I'll let John comment. I actually hadn't really drawn a link between mindfulness and creativity and innovation before, so that is great to think of it in that way. And it makes sense now that it's put in front of me. So, at GPT, we've tried different ways of bringing mindfulness into the organisation, but we've kind of danced around the side of it. And I think when it gets to crunch time and you're making big decisions, we don't bring it in at all. We kind of use it as a restful activity ahead of a strategy day or something. So actually changing the DNA to bring it in to being part of an accepted practice to sponsor and support innovation is worth a go.
Yeah, well, that would be a change right there, right? Just from a practice perspective. John?
I found it really interesting. Adrian said, how did I feel doing that? I actually felt a bit guilty, to be honest. So I felt a bit guilty because I wasn't doing anything. And I'm one of those people who do all my thinking at night. Like I'm a 3 a.m., good idea guy. So all my innovation happens in the middle of the night for some reason. And that's probably because I don't take that time in the day. So I found it, it was interesting. It was really interesting.
I just want to speak and say I'm so grateful that you shared that perspective, John, that you were honest enough to say that what can come up for you when you actually stop is guilt that we're not perhaps doing something else, being more productive with our time. And to then actually convey that your ideas time can happen later at night and so on. Now, that could be a byproduct of your brain finally having some downtime to connect together all of the information and stimulus from the day, and then it serves you up to you, but perhaps not at a time that's ideal. And so instead, and similar to the examples raised, if we can make just some pockets of space where we can use our time to allow our mind to not only focus on what's going on right here, right now, but we can actually use mindfulness practices to inquire into what's going on. Let's think freely. Let's in fact allow our mind to wander, because in that mind wandering, sometimes we'll get those little connections bubbling through and an insight can emerge, similar to what you experience late at night. So that's great to hear your perspective. I'm sure that it's actually common amongst so many people. And I guess the encouragement here is, whilst we can be so go, for so many other reasons as well, we benefit from just taking some time to stop and practice these skills for the other benefits around our stress and resilience through these challenges as well.
All right, well, Adrian, I'm really keen to hear number 2.
Fantastic. So this is going to be the first of a couple of creativity techniques. So some techniques that actually help us to generate ideas when we're looking at an innovation challenge, whether that's a problem that we need to solve, that we're in fact forced to solve as an example, or innovation also happens when we do identify opportunities that we can chase after. This technique is called roll with it. And it's an opportunity for us to actually put ourselves in the shoes of someone else. Adopting a mindset and a point of view, a perspective that really challenges us to think very differently. And we can deliberately adopt the mindset of someone very different to us. And as I sort of introduced as well, we can also adopt the mindset of someone that's maybe even strategically related to the innovation challenge or opportunity we're faced with. And so when I use this technique with people that I'm coaching or workshops that I'm facilitating, I actually produce stimulus, and I produce posters that have a different character, whether that's a real person from now or the past, or whether it's a fictitious character from a movie, or whether it's an organization that can provide us with a perspective on how they go about doing their work. And so I've just cherry-picked here Mother Teresa for something different. And if we zoom in on this stimulus, we can see this quote from her here: "Spread the love everywhere you go. Let no one ever come to you without leaving happier." Now, just in engaging with this stimulus and thinking about Mother Teresa and her selflessness through her life and her compassion and her role as a teacher, and thinking about this quote, we are already able to prime our thinking with a whole lot of different stimulus. And if we force the connection between this way of thinking and this way of being to the challenge that we're working on, we can actually do this, not only force creativity, but we might find ideas that would not otherwise be coming to us. And this has come from deliberately taking the point of view on our innovation challenge of someone very different to us. So why does this work? Well, the reason why it works is that whenever we're looking at an innovation challenge or a problem or an opportunity, it is very automatic for us to look at it through our own point of view, the lens of our own experience, our own knowledge, our own skills. But this technique actually forces us to deliberately take on the point of view, the qualities, the headspace, even the ideas and innovations of someone very, very different to us. And we use that as stimulus to force new ideas out of our own brain. So just some quick how-to steps on how to use this one. We assign someone in an idea generation session, and if you're working on your own, you can simply select to take the role of someone very different to yourself. But if you're facilitating a meeting or a group, you can actually hand out lots of different roles and assignments to really prompt everyone to think quite differently and improve the diversity of their ideas. It gives people some time to get into role, and that might be getting on Google and searching for some information on that character or that business, downloading some latest news, looking at some key quotes, looking at images that get you into that headspace, and then invite people to really think from that point of view and force ideas to the challenge you're working on in that meeting or workshop. If you've got enough time, you can actually swap the stimulus around, and you might be surprised by the ideas that come from first thinking about this in terms of Mother Teresa, and then adopting the perspective of Bruce Lee and seeing what that hybrid brings in terms of creative thinking. You can choose radical roles that are very, very different personas, or you could be quite strategic. And as an example, you might select an innovator or an entrepreneur in the category that you're innovating. So that is the roll with it exercise for creative idea generation.
Can I jump in and say, look, is anyone else thinking about charades? Right? Or that, what's that game where you got to put someone's name?
Celebrity head.
Celebrity head, there it is, right? And one of the things a comment I wanted to make about your approach here, which I think is particularly powerful, is choosing someone that inspires you. Because if you're inspired by Mother Teresa, for example, and as you put there, her humility as well, and her own self-doubts. I was reading a little bit about, we sort of paint these people in kind of glorious, perfect pictures, but also respecting their humanity. There are aspects of these people that come to mind that inspire us. And so what can we do through that lens of inspiration to kind of step into that role, possibly do a better job than I've ever done with Celebrity Head? I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this one.
Just that I mean, I've heard of, in a brainstorming session, you need someone who's going to be the devil's advocate or argue against, but never taking it to this extent. So I think it is, I get that you'd have to prepare for it, but I can see how it could bring such fruitness to the discussion. Yeah. So, yeah.
Are you still uncomfortable, John?
No, I'm okay now. I've come back.
Okay.
And it really gives people permission to be radical as well. If they perhaps didn't have the courage to put forward ideas that were quite crazy, if they could blame it on the stimulus of a particular character, perhaps they feel more confident to put that idea forward.
Yeah, it makes it more psychologically safe. Sorry, John.
That's right. I was going to say, in our industry, property is a very traditional industry as such, generally, other than Space & Co, I'd say, which is quite the opposite. But in property, we do things a certain way, and that's the way they're done, and they've always been done that way, probably since the GFC. And I think our type of innovation does get locked into this mindset of if this is the way we do things, and we're not that open to it. So it's an interesting concept, and I'd be interested to try and put it in practice.
Yeah, let's do it.
Now, I've got a couple more that I want to roll through just to really get the most out of not only our individual creative thinking, but to really also start to transition to how do we actually skillfully facilitate the innovation and creative problem-solving process with others. So I'm going to dive into technique number 3 now, which is the second creativity technique, and this one's called Broaden Your Horizons. Okay, so it's an incredibly important principle, and it's associated with but can be used differently to the Roll With It assignment. So broadening your horizons. An example as another innovator, Steve Jobs, actually conveyed the importance of having diverse experiences that we can call on. So the quote here, a lot of people in our industry haven't had very diverse experiences, so they don't have enough dots to connect. What he means is having diverse experiences gives us a breadth of information, knowledge, and capability. And that breadth and diversity gives us more options that can actually plug together in unique combinations, therefore forming new ideas and new ways of doing things. And so he goes on to say here, the broader one's understanding of the human experience, the better design we will have. So really opening our minds up to the breadth of what we could understand, even in areas that feel unrelated to the challenge at hand, that can be incredibly powerful when we start connecting those dots. Something that he did, and it's a very popular innovation story, when he was back in his university days, he actually studied something completely unrelated in calligraphy, and he learned how to create proportionally spaced lettering and beautiful writing on the page. And then fast forward a number of years, and he was thinking about that boxy green writing on the first computers and asked, why does it have to look so bad? Why can't we make the writing look beautiful? And now we all take for granted the fact that fonts on our computer exist, but it came from a very diverse experience unrelated to what it is that he was working on, forcing a connection very much downstream in his life. So accumulating diverse experience is incredibly important. So why does this work? Having broad stimulus, having broad knowledge and experience gives us an opportunity to connect the dots and think more divergently. More thought combinations and stimulus bouncing around in our mind. And by using this technique in a creative brainstorming session or when you're getting stuck, it'll actually prime the mind to have front and center a whole lot of different information ready for you to work with.
That's great. And
so I can either pause there or...
You're continuing to inspire us. I think these ideas are pushing us kind of outside of perhaps what we think about innovation as being these traditional molds of, if you're almost like a factory or a formula. But we've got to be finding these spaces where we can look for different ways of thinking. Connecting the dots to me is like gold. I hope I'm not getting too old, but with age comes experience, right? And remembering that those dots that you've collected along the way are really, really valuable.
I agree.
Right? Okay, good.
No, I agree. If I share a reflection, I'm thinking a lot about the team that I work with and the business that we run. And I feel that GPT has made a really conscious effort to create this team to look after the business that is Space & Co, who have all come from outside of the property industry.
Yeah.
So they've really recognised it's a different real estate option, it's a different solution, and it requires a different sort of skill set and diversity of thought to what a traditional property offering may be. So hopefully that places us in good stead.
I think so.
Yeah.
Now, I'll just quickly share this technique, which is for collaboration, because creativity is something that we can do with our own individual and independent brains, but innovation becomes really powerful when we can come together with our creative ideas and our different perspectives and form stronger innovations as a result. And so this technique here is where we first will ask ourselves or others to focus on generating ideas, solving the innovation challenge or problem, coming up with the ideas that they have using their own unique brain. this is the value of actually getting diverse brains working on the same challenge. And so we need to actually give that individual the instruction and some time to come up with their own ideas. What can tend to happen in brainstorming sessions is actually that people just start sharing their ideas, the extrovert gets involved, then the person with seniority starts taking charge. And what that does is it prematurely converges everyone's thinking on the same sort of stuff. And as a result, you really extinguish that diverse thinking right from the get-go. So the principle and the technique I want to encourage you to understand here is to switch from individual thinking mode and giving people time to think for themselves first, then switch into small groups that can actually share those diverse ideas and then build them together into something as strong as it can be. And so why does this work? It increases the diversity and quantity, the volume of ideas that you have access to, which gives you more dots that you connect even there. It promotes the individualistic thinking, which gives us access to all of the different perspectives and histories of the different brains we're bringing together. It reduces the impact of dominant people or seniority biases, actually steering people in a particular way. And it provides, importantly, really great thinking introverts with the instruction to take some time for themselves. And in fact, the instruction to then share their ideas one by one in a small group, feeling comfortable to do that rather than sitting back, which would potentially be their tendency, and being overrun by other more dominant characters. So that's why it works, and it's really simple to use. Give people some time to themselves to think based on the innovation challenge, then call them together into small groups to discuss their ideas, share on them, build on them, and then they'll actually form stronger ideas in a group as a result.
Look, I think that's fantastic. The thing that came to mind actually, because we work in a creative space here, and we had to put a creative proposal together, and the best ideas actually came from the youngest people in the room. And when we created a space for that to happen, I'm quite amused by this idea of the hippo, if you've heard of it, the highest paid person's opinion, right? And we need to avoid that becoming the only opinion in the room, as valid as everyone's opinions would be. Shay, did you have any thoughts on that one?
I haven't heard of the hippo before.
Yeah, well, there you go, it's my gift.
Yes, but I can see how that influence, and I think that your ideas around setting up a small team to give that safety and security to be able to nurture ideas coming from all different minds is, again, so obvious but so often overlooked.
Yeah, I agree.
And Mark, thanks for not throwing to me after the hippo. However, I agree. I think some of this has shone out in our business as part of this disruption, if you want to call it, that's taken over us the last few months. And I see your team, Shay, with as Shay said, a whole team of people outside the industry that have come into the industry, and their input's been invaluable when we look about how we're going to reopen these spaces and get these buildings and Space & Co and all these areas up and running again. They've been invaluable, and they've been the first to come up with the plans for us to reignite the business. So yeah, I think you're right on it, Adrian.
Thanks, John.
Fantastic. All right, so now look, can we just get a couple of questions in here as we're going? The question is actually for John. This is from Michelle, who says, how does John see industry innovating to respond to the current climate? Maybe just one little thing to build on your comments there.
What I would say is it's absolutely forced at the moment, but I think some really good things will come out of this. I've already seen things that we've started to put into place, and I think to myself, wow, why didn't we think of this? You know, why didn't we come up with this a couple of years ago? We've been forced into it. It makes absolute sense. So I think for me, although it's a massive disruption to business is going to run differently, and ultimately we'll do a lot of stuff a lot better. So, and I think also Adrian sort of alluded to this, it's about get everyone involved, and if nothing else, this disruption has got us all involved and everybody's in there, and I think that's great. It's not just being led by a few of us, who think we know best. So I think I'm fairly positive about the way forward.
That's great. All right, well, Adrian.
Thank you. So we've looked at the creative process generating creative ideas when we need to innovate. We've looked at how we can collaborate. And my final point on that is we might think that it's our own independent role to innovate and that the challenge or the opportunity is for us in isolation. So if you think that this group dynamic doesn't apply to you, it absolutely does. Find some diverse brains that you can actually have participate in the creative process with you. Even if you're the one that's going to run with the ideas in the end, if you can get the perspectives of people different to you, your ideas can be stronger for it. But then when we actually do get an idea that we like, how do we make sure that we capture it in a way that we can convey it easily to others and test whether our ideas and thinking is strong enough to move forward? We need a good idea snapshot, and I've got a template to share with you now that can help us to really flesh out our ideas so that we can pitch them easily. So on an A4 sheet of paper, we can record an idea, and we don't have an idea until we've spelled out IDEA. So we need to give our idea first a name, describe what the idea is about as it relates to the innovation challenge you're working on. And you can create this either like a thought bubble or like a magnifying glass with the idea name at the top, and then you write a line down the middle of your A4 sheet of paper. On the left-hand side, you've got the description of the idea. So what is the idea specifically? And be as specific as you can so that you've challenged your thinking and the thinking of your small group to actually detail out what this idea is about and what it means. And then really importantly, how are you going to execute it? So how will you implement the idea? What are the steps involved? Who's going to be accountable for what? So just to give more flesh to the concept that might have been put on the table. And then to actually think creatively by bringing it to life through artwork. What does this idea look like? How would we actually draw what the experience is? It forces our creative process to go into a different zone, not just being about the written word. So why does this work? It helps us to create more specific and more actionable ideas. Because I don't know if you've been in a situation where you've run a facilitated meeting to come up with ideas and they've all been bullet pointed onto a flip chart, and then when you look at it after the meeting, having thought you had good ideas, you just had a whole bunch of concepts that just bleed into each other. And this ensures that each idea gets its own opportunity to shine on its own idea snapshot. Describing and depicting the idea using artwork just gives us different ways to force the creative process and sharpen up a good, strong, actionable idea. So how do we do it? As I introduced, a simple snapshot on an A4 sheet of paper. It's best used when you're collaborating in small groups, and simply putting down an idea name, making sure it's catchy so that it can win people's attention. Describe it specifically. How are you going to execute it and bring it to life with some artwork? So I've got a couple of key principles to share. I'm happy to pause for any questions or to just really hit home some important principles that we need to consider to move from ideas to innovation to impact. Look, so I'll just engage with you whether any questions are coming through.
Yeah, look, we do have some questions, but let's get to your questions at the end. I'll just make a quick comment is to say that IDEA is an acronym I reckon I can remember. So well done for that, because most of them aren't, right? So let's get to those really strong, actionable insights, and I've got a couple of questions that we'll answer at the end. And just aware of our time, because time moves fast.
It sure does. So these ones will roll through, and I actually believe that they will have more questions that they provoke. So the key principles, as opposed to really going into depth into these as a technique, are that we need to, when innovating, present our case with strength, and we need to plan really thoughtfully about the change that adds value. And these are things that can be undercooked, because we can see the innovation process as something that's exciting, we're thinking creatively, but innovation is hard work in disguise. We don't just come up with good ideas and that does the work for us. We need to actually move through to implementation, and that's where the rubber hits the road. So to present your case, and you will have within your businesses different ways that you need to communicate your innovative ideas, I'm just going to give you some key principles that you should include whenever you're putting together your innovation as a case that you present and pitch. So firstly, you need to articulate what is the relevant challenge that your idea, your innovative idea, solves. Is it solving a problem that's relevant? Is it actually exploring and capitalizing on an opportunity? If you can hook people in by saying, here's a relevant challenge and I've got an idea for you, people will want to listen. Then you actually explain and detail clearly what the idea is. Be as concise as possible, because convoluted ideas can mean that people think it's all too hard and it's easy to say no. So get specific and be clear. Then you've got to convey, okay, I've got a challenge that's really relevant and I've got an idea that solves that challenge. Who benefits? So describe the customer and how they benefit. Then explain importantly, what is the innovation here? What is new? What is the change that adds value, so that people can see that it's an extension of or a disruption to what we have seen before. Finally, and again, we're going to get detailed about how we're going to implement it, so we can communicate with confidence that this is something that's actionable, that we can actually move forward with. We need to convey the value that it creates. It either makes money, saves money, or has a positive impact on people in the world. And finally, what evidence do you have that it will work? So either finding evidence to support your innovation or explaining how you'll get the evidence that shows that this is a good idea. So present your case. These are some key things that you need to present when putting your innovation forward. Now, I've got a cringy cliche ahead, so you have been warned. And the cliche is, if you fail the plan, you are planning to fail. We hear this so often, but I'm going to reinforce its significance right here. We need to thoughtfully plan when we're innovating. So planning your change, you need to make sure that you're thinking through all of the traps that might lead people that you need to convince, stakeholders, customers, internal innovation teams, whoever needs to be involved in moving this forward. You need to think through these traps and resolve them in order to give your innovative ideas the opportunity to shine. The first is facing some really important facts as they relate to human beings going through a process of taking action and making change. Because if we don't make the change, the innovation, if we don't make the change relevant, people will get distracted. Other things will feel like a more important priority. So make it relevant for people. If we are not feeling ready for change, we will resist it. So if our own innovation is something where we're not ready for it, we'll resist undertaking it. But if we don't create readiness amongst the people that need to get involved as well, it will be resisted. So build change readiness. If we don't make the change feel rewarding, people will lose motivation. So you've got to explain the benefits. What are the rewards that the different people involved in the innovation are hoping to attain? Because if we don't make it rewarding, people won't be motivated to get behind it. If we don't make the change feel realistic by stepping out, what are the actions we need to take? How do we go from here to where we need to go? If we don't make that change realistic, people will lose confidence in their ability to actually move forward and implement that innovation. If we don't get responsible about the change that needs to happen, and this can be through clear leadership and accountability, then we won't sustain the action needed to actually move through goals and milestones along the implementation journey. And finally, if we don't learn through this process, and if we hit a trap of relapse, getting ourselves back on track, if we don't learn, if we're not resilient in bouncing back, we will fall short of our potential. Our innovations will fall short of what it is that we're hoping to achieve. So these are some basic or key behavioral science insights that are absolutely key when it comes to our own process of innovation and innovating where we need to influence others as well. My final message before I close is that we, as a result, need to take action. And Einstein couldn't have said it better. nothing happens until something moves. So have great ideas, get yourself in the right zone, think creatively, collaborate together, capture ideas, present them with strength, plan them really effectively, and then go, take action.
Look, that was fantastic. So many great ideas there. How many R's were in that last slide? I hope people are writing them down, because some really tangible, I think excellent things you can actually implement now, like straight away. These are all very practical things. I think, a takeaway for me is just how focused we do need to be on this task. To jump straight into questions, if we're going to run an innovation session with some of these techniques, how much time should we plan, Adrian?
I think time is a really important question, but also one thing that I want to say first is to make sure that people are focusing their attention on one challenge at a time. So one of the traps that people fall into when innovating in groups is that they'll have a whole bunch of different challenges and opportunities and idea springboards, and that can create a lot of confusion and in fact not have people just focus their energy and attention on one particular challenge at a time. So being mindful there, thinking creatively, but focusing the idea generation on one challenge at a time. When it comes to how long we should run these sessions for, it really depends on how many rounds of idea generation you might want to facilitate. So I've taken you through a couple of techniques. You might go into a meeting, maybe it's half an hour, maybe it's an hour, where you'll use one, maybe if it's an hour, two of these techniques, the idea generation techniques themselves. Set it up by being clear on the challenge, get people practicing mindfulness, use one or a couple of idea generation techniques, then getting people to collaborate by switching from individual to group mode, capturing their ideas into a snapshot, and then actually looking at the diversity of ideas, deciding on which are the best ones, and building your case. So all of these steps take time. I don't think that within an hour you would get a fleshed out business case, but you would certainly get to the point where you've got a bunch of diverse idea snapshots, and you might leave it there and then return in a week to the diverse ideas, and actually in the fullness of time maybe you've had some thinking time, much like John, where at 3 o'clock in the morning you go, oh my gosh, a couple of those ideas that I saw in that workshop were fantastic, let's actually move those forward in the next session and build our case behind them.
John, do you reckon you can move some of your thinking time to like the PM hours? What do you reckon?
I'm going to try. That's what I can do. I'll report in. I'll do my best.
I keep throwing you on the bus with that one.
No, it's a good point, regardless of what the hour of the day is. Maybe allowing more time, perhaps, than we think. A bit like a home renovation, just by the way. For those of you playing at home, excuse the pun. That was terrible. Sorry, but next question was if we're how important. This is Thomas says, how important is it to gather experience and techniques from outside your specific industry?
Well, I think it's incredibly important. But as with these things, it can really it can vary so much as to when you capitalize on it. So in the example of Steve Jobs, it was years and years before that diversity experience actually paid off in the way that it formed an idea that led to a significant innovation. And so I guess the point is, if we collect diverse experiences and take some opportunities to see what we can force in terms of the connections between those experiences and the challenges we're working on, then that's great. But we might be surprised at particularly something coming out of the history, out of the archives, many years later, leading to a significant innovation. So collect diverse experiences. It's good for our brains and our growth anyway, and it will fill your brains with all sorts of different knowledge, stimulus, and capability that gives you the potential to not be railroaded in your thinking, and in fact to think more broadly when you need to.
That's great. Now, there's a comment here, a question that was actually sent in kind of at the beginning of our program, actually, and I think we could all maybe use this as a way of wrapping up. So now that society and business are beginning a staged return, we have an opportunity to redefine what our workplaces will be like, to prepare ourselves personally for a transition. So in that context, if we're thinking about innovation, do we need to be maybe, the immediate steps ahead? How could we bring ourselves together around the idea of, the present needs of our organisation? How can I apply your techniques to something that's not a, if you like, a side hustle, but something that's directly linked to a business problem?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clear on the question. So it's about noticing a specific challenge that the business is having, and then focusing everyone's attention on that. Is that right?
Rather than seeing it as something that's off to the side, something that's outside of the mainstream.
It's so important that innovation and the creative process is something that can be shared across an organisation and all of its people, because in that lies the diversity of human brains and experiences that you can pull together to shape and form ideas. And there's a number of examples of where the person on the front line has a different experience to those in the head office, as an example, but when we can get these different groups together, the connections can be forced into stronger ideas as a result. And so it's true that yes, we need to bring together the diverse experiences and perspectives across our organisation, and to celebrate that diversity in the workshops that we facilitate, helping everyone feel that they have a valuable role to play in addressing the challenges of the time for that organisation.
Well, Shay, what would your quick comments be on how you might apply these ideas?
Ooh, I think that as we kind of move to the next phase and we're transitioning out of this virtual remote world that we've been operating in and back into our workplaces and our schools, let's bring on the schools.
Yes.
There's going to be, I think there's going to be tremendous opportunity to apply a lot of the insights we've learnt today and over the series leading up to this, because we're not going back to, I think it's naive of us to think we're going back to what was. We're transitioning forward to a new normal, and we need to be ready for that.
Yeah. And John, some quick closing comments?
Yeah, for me, I think what I picked up out of it is really planning for some of that change. So especially now, because we're in a fast change mode and we're coming up with things quickly. But clearly, you've still got to put the right amount of thought into it and the right amount of planning into it, and get the right people together. Is what you're saying, Adrian. So yeah, I found it really a really positive preso. Thank you.
Well, look, on behalf of our panel and everybody watching, would you please give Adrian a big virtual clap for his presentation, his ideas. I'm inspired. I know you are. We're going to take a lot of really tangible, practical insights away that we can move forward with. Before you all go, a couple of things just to wrap up. Transition is actually the topic of our next show. The next live show we'll be looking at in the workplace, how do we transition? In our personal lives, how do we transition? And even more broadly than that as a society, there's a sense that we need to be moving forward in a clear but planned way. So I think the connection between innovation and transition is going to be a really fascinating one to unpack next time. So that is it for today. There will be, as I said, a pop-up. We'd love you to complete that survey so we can continue to improve. Stay in touch, tell your friends about the show, make sure you subscribe to the next one, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. A quick reminder too, if you want more information on Dr Adrian Medhurst's organisation, bennybutton.com is where you can expect to get more information. So again, thank you, Adrian, for your time today. Also Shay and John.
Thank you.
For all of you who are joining us, thank you so much, and we will see you next time.